Yeah. All right, guys. Let's. If you got your phones with you, go ahead and share. It's Ruth 3 and 4, but it's probably too late for that, isn't it? All right. Well, Valerie Blair says hello to us from the beach, so that's nice of her. Hope she's having a good time in St. Augustine. All right. Does anybody have any prayer requests before we get started this evening? Yes, Becky.
Remember our sister, Mad Becky. Becky. She is having surgery tomorrow night. So we pray for, good outcomes.
Absolutely.
And also, one of my daughter's closest friends called, and her grandparents, Tom Branham and Ruby Branham, are really ill. Tom's been in the hospital for a while. I'm really not sure what it is, but it sounds like he may not make it out. And now Ruby has COVID and she can't go be with him. So they're going to be in our prayers.
So we remember Tom and Ruby Branham, and both are ill, very ill. And we also want to remember Becky as she has surgery tomorrow, Becky Barr. So let's pray for that. Johnny.
Family of Jeremy Melvin.
Yeah.
Prayed for Jeremy, and there's a little time passed away, and I don't know anything about arrangements, but I'm trying to.
What was his first name?
Jeremy.
Jeremy Melvin passed away, so remember that family. Yeah, Jonathan.
Coworker work, Josh Snyder said that passed, they're working on arrangements, and she'll be next week.
Okay, so one of your coworkers, his dad passed. Stepdad passed, yeah. Okay, so just remember that family. Anyone else this evening? Anybody? Any unspoken prayer requests? Everybody. All right. Darren, would you open us up with a word of prayer?
Most precious Heavenly Father God, we come to you this evening, Lord, with open hearts, Lord, of a prayer request on our minds, Lord, and on our hearts, God. Lord, we just ask you to be with all those spoken requests, Lord, and unspoken requests by those of us. And be with us this evening, Lord, as we enter into your word and study the book of Ruth. We ask all this in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. All right. So if you're wondering why I have a spot on my chest, is because I can't eat without getting stuff on me. So I had to clean myself up just a minute ago. All right. We are in Ruth chapter 3. We will finish this up today. We will do 3 and 4 today. All right. Ruth chapter 3. Now, what has happened so far up to this point? Anybody tell me?
Well, Ruth has followed Naomi
To
to Jerusalem, well, not Israel. I don't remember.
Bethlehem.
Bethlehem.
Yep.
Okay. And she has gone out to see if she can get grain with the women that follow the harvesters that glean the leavings.
Right.
And she's been noticed by Boaz, and Boaz has instructed the young men to not bother her and to deliberately leave some sheaves of grain for her to get.
Right. So what are some things so far that where we could see God has shown up, even though she can't see it yet?
Because she doesn't know who Boaz is.
She doesn't know who Boaz is. Who is Boaz?
He's the redeemer, guardian, or something for their family.
Right. He's one of their relatives who would be a guardian redeemer for them, or a kinsman redeemer. He's also what?
In the lineage?
Yes, he's also in the lineage of Jesus. Yeah, absolutely. And so this story, which I'll post this sermon later, but Dawn had sent me a sermon I guess it was like a week and a half ago, by a guy named Vodi Bakum, and who's a great preacher, but about this. And one of the things he pointed out in there is that this is a story that, like, it has so many. It's amazing how much stuff is packed into 4 chapters, truly, because it can speak to you if you're going through hardship. It can speak to you if you're going through marital problems. It can speak to you if you're going through loss. It can speak to you if you're looking for hope. It can speak to you if you're wondering to know if God is there. Like, it's got so many aspects to it. But we're looking in this story, and it's like the first chapter is just like total devastation. Truly. I mean, you have famine in the land, right? You've been taken captive, right? They've been taken captive in the midst of this, right? And then your husband takes you out of the promised land. Then he dies. Then your sons die. And now you're literally homeless. I mean, it's basically the equivalent of what he said a woman would be, because if a woman doesn't have a husband or sons to provide, she literally has nothing in that time period. And so it could not have got any worse. That's why when she came back, what did Naomi change her name to when she came back? Mara, which means bitter. Now, what did she say, though, about all this? Who did she put the blame on? God. Right? She put the blame on God, that God has done this to me, right? And I want to point out something that, and listen to that sermon today by Bodie that really just like blew me away when we get to the end of this, about where she was mentally and spiritually, because she sends, what we're going to see today, she sends Ruth in with kind of a deceitful like intention to like trick Boaz, right? Basically, right? But Boaz, we're going to see, and we've already seen, is a good man. Like, he is a good man, and Ruth is a good woman, right? And that's why she doesn't do it. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go through here. All right, so we're in chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "One day Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, 'My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you, or you'll be well provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor.'" All right, and so winnowing barley is how they would separate those sheaves out and actually get the barley off of them, right? That's what winnowing was, is separating. And we, like I said, we see that in the New Testament, the separating the wheat and the chaff. Like that's a constant theme throughout the Scriptures. So he'll be on the threshing floor, and wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. Why?
So she looks good.
Right. Look as good as you can, okay? As you go, and don't stink, right? Don't stink, okay? Go down there.
In a year of preparation.
Right. Yeah, they didn't. That's exactly. It's not like Esther. They got 12 months of getting cleaned up. And so she's like, go get dressed up. And I do want to point something out to you. If you look at, let's see, I think it's Hosea chapter 9. Let's find this real quick. I was thinking the same thing, Liz. I think I just passed it. Okay, so Hosea is the story of Hosea and Gomer, but it's also telling us the story of Israel, right? So by this indication, it's not uncommon for there to be prostitutes around the threshing floor where the men would work all day and then whatever, okay? And so in chapter 9, verse 1, as punishment for Israel, listen to what God is saying to Israel. "Do not rejoice, O Israel. Do not be jubilant like the other nations, for you have been unfaithful to your God. You love the wages of a prostitute at every threshing floor." Right? And so we do seem to have this aspect that there's other things at play in this story that we don't know about. Okay? That there's other cultural aspects that may be going on in this time period. Because keep in mind, Israel is not Israel right now. Right? They are in a time of upheaval, because when is this taking place? They're in a time of who? They're in the judges, right? And so they're either doing really well with the judge, or when the judge leaves, what happens to the people? They get worse and worse and worse and worse. So Israel is in a time of this, okay? And with indication we talked about earlier, that if there's a famine, what could that be an indication of? Judgment from God. So it's possible, it doesn't say this, but it's possible that they are in a moment of falling away from God in this moment, right? And so anyway, she comes back, and so she says, "Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes, then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there until he's finished eating and drinking." All right, so we know this is not the best of intentions on Naomi's part. She's like, "I'm going to trick you into getting a husband." Now, what would be one of the things that would keep Ruth from getting a husband here? Her nationality. What is she? She's a Moabitess, right? They are the enemies of Israel, right? They are actually one of the ones that God allows to take over Israel. Now, the Moabites came from who? Came from Lot, right? When when Lot's wife died, when they left Sodom and Gomorrah, then his daughters were afraid they weren't going to have any offspring, so they got their dad drunk, and one of them got pregnant, and boom, meet your dad/grandfather, right? It's weird, okay? And so there they are. But this is where this has come from. And so keep in mind, too, like, you still have, this is family, right? Because if Boaz came from Abraham and she came from Lot, like, they're family, right? All the way back. But yet, just because they're family doesn't mean they're in the right place, right? So, which is why we see the whole Jesus comparison of Boaz here, because he takes in somebody who really shouldn't be part of what he is, right? And yet he shows them grace. And so she goes down there and says, but don't let him know you're there until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he's lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. All right, this just sounds weird. Just reading this, it just sounds weird. Like, it's weird. I mean, now, again, I'm sure there's some cultural aspect of now, I have read, and I didn't get to, and I've been painting all day, so I didn't get to like dig in it, but I have read that it's possible that the uncovering of the feet, and when she says in just a minute, like, or what does he say? He tells her to, it's something he tells, when she says, spread the corner of your garment over me, that may have some like marriage ceremony indications, like it's part of a marriage ritual. So, oh. Okay, so there you go. So that would be later when she asks him to put that corner of it over me. She's asking him to like marry her, basically protect me, take care of me, and that would be how the husband would put his shawl over the woman to show that she was under his protection. Okay, but now I don't know that that's Naomi's intention with this. Okay, but again, what do we know about Ruth before? Okay, why did Boaz show favor on her? Because she was a good woman, right? Because he knew what she had done for Naomi. He knew that she was a woman of noble character, that she stuck with her, okay? And so he knows what kind of woman she is. So Ruth says, I'll do whatever you say. So she goes down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. And that, from my understanding, that's what they do. They thresh all day long until they were exhausted. And they would eat and drink. And then they would just fall asleep right there in the work, so they'd just get back up and go at it again the next day, right? And so it says, Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, and he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer. Now, is that what Naomi told her to do? No, not really, because what did Naomi say? Do whatever he says. Now, she's going to, but she went ahead and explained why she was there, right? She went ahead and told him, this is what I'm here for, okay? So she said, spread your garment over me because you are my kinsman redeemer. In other words, redeem me, marry me, let me be yours, okay? Basically is what she's effectively saying to him, okay? The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. Now, what do you think? What do you think he's saying there?
That he's old.
That he's old, right? But what else?
That she's not a gold digger, basically.
Well, she's not a gold digger. But what's possible, though? It may not be able to have a child. He may not be able to give her what a younger man would be able to give her. Okay? And yet he's saying, you've shown kindness to me because clearly this man doesn't have a wife. And then we don't hear of one, right? And so he's saying that you've shown kindness by even seeking me out to do this. And so... But,
she's been married before, she probably, most women be searching for a husband trying to latch on.
Right. Right, that's exactly right. Yeah, she wasn't desperately searching on her. Remember, this was Naomi's idea. Naomi was like, I need to find you a home, someplace that you can be taken care of, right? And so he says, now, but daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character. So she must have been there for a while. okay, long enough for the people of the town to know what type of woman she is, right? And so they know that she's a woman of noble character. And he says, although it's true that I am near of kin, there is a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. Meaning what? Yeah. I'm not the closest relative to Elimelech, okay? And so he goes on to say, stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. You know what's interesting about that kinsman redeemer thing, because like, love is not an issue here. I mean, you think about that, because he's like, this guy doesn't even know who you are, but I've got to tell him first if he wants first dibs. I mean, really, that's effectively what he's saying. You know, but Boaz clearly has respect for her. And he's like, yeah, I'll absolutely, I would take you in a heartbeat, but we have to do this right. Because remember, what is Boaz? He is faithful to God, right? He is faithful to the way this is supposed to run. Remember, that's why he allowed them to thresh and get to glean the threshings behind them, right? He's following the law. And so here he is again, being faithful to what God has commanded. So it says, but if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. Right? So he's trying to protect her image, right? Because nothing happened, and he wants to make sure that she's still recognized as a woman of noble character, which makes him a man of noble character, right? And so we're in chapter 3, verse 15. He also said, bring me the shawl you're wearing and hold it out. When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and put it on her, and then went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, how'd it go, my daughter? Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her, and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed, which I think that's hilarious. I just think that's so funny. He's like, and take this back to your mother-in-law. It's just funny to me. Like, she's pacing around waiting to see what happens, and then she gets something out of it, right? And so then says, then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. So that brings us to now's kind of the times. They're still waiting, and they don't have social media, so they can't go and check Facebook or get text or see what's happening. They're just waiting to see what's going to happen.
So what I'm assuming from what he said that he was not alone in the threshing floor. There were other people there.
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah.
So, it could have gone bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that could have. A lot of things could have been, I guess, thought of or misconceived, or about her. Especially, yeah.
I think one of the funny things or ironic things about that chapter is that somehow he must have really had a clear conscience. Not only was he a good man, he had a clear conscience. Because somehow, he did not wake up until the middle of the night to find a woman at his feet. Most people
Right.
would have realized somebody's there unless you're really, really sound asleep.
Right. Yeah, and he's drunk, right? And he's drunk, which, I mean, I've never personally been drunk, so I can't speak to that, but I have heard that a lot of times it accentuates who you really are, or it brings it out. And yet here he is waking up, and he's still a good man, coming off of drinking a lot, right? He's still a good man and recognizes, hey, you stay right there, I'll do whatever it is you ask me tomorrow. Said he was in good spirits.
Well, she said wait till he goes.
Yeah.
His heart was cheerful.
Yeah. It was real warm. Yeah, Jackie.
I think it's important here to remember that Boaz's mother was Rahab, who was called a prostitute in Scripture. Now, that could mean that she was prostituting herself to the gods, or she could have truly been having illicit affairs with men. However, Boaz is older, so he could have already been ostracized to a degree, and because of his image. And on top of that, he wants to make sure that Ruth is not brought to question like his mother would have been considered. I feel like that.
That's a great point.
Has something to do with, we don't want
Right, because I'm sure he knows how awful it could be secondhand for people to assume you're something.
And then you said in that culture, frequently prostitutes hung out.
At the threshing floor, yeah.
So if they could woke up, I'm sorry there, they
But-
could assume that she was.
We thought you were this good girl this whole time. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, though, about his mom being Rahab. All right, so we're in chapter 4, okay, verse 1. It says, Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there. When the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned, I want to know who it is. What's his name? Okay, it doesn't say. It doesn't ever tell us, all right? So, when the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, Come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, Sit here. And they did so. Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I mean, he's a good man. Like, he absolutely could have, done this and be like, oh, I forgot about you, but he didn't. And the guy was like, I'll redeem it. I'll buy it. I'll take it, okay? Then Boaz said, because, right now, what's the guy doing? He's just adding to what he owns, right? He has more possessions now. Then he says, On the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. Right? So this is interesting too. Boaz is trying to make sure that the property stays in her husband's name. Or really, well, I guess in Naomi's husband's name, in Elimelech's name, that it doesn't change names. In order to do that, he's saying you have to take Ruth too, because she is the one who's married into the family.
So to redeem somebody, obviously it includes, purchasing their property and everything associated with them?
Yeah, so it's if we go back to Leviticus 25, if I remember this correctly. Leviticus 25, starting with verse 47 through 49. Okay, so again, this is talking about the year of Jubilee, but we're going to see kind of a glimpse into this idea of redeeming somebody in your family. Okay. It says, if an alien or a temporary resident among you becomes rich and one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells himself to the alien living among you or to a member of the alien's clan, he retains the right of redemption after he has sold himself. One of his relatives may redeem him. An uncle or a cousin or any blood relative in his clan may redeem him. Or if he prospers, he may redeem himself. Verse 50, it says, he and his buyer are to count the time from the year he sold himself up to the year of Jubilee. The price for his release is to be based on the rate paid to a hired man for that number of years. If many years remain, he must pay for his redemption a larger share of the price paid for him. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, he is to compute that and pay for his redemption accordingly. Okay, and so here we have this idea that your family can come and redeem you, basically buy you back to your worth, but it's going to cost them. So it's not just free. It's not like the guy can just be like, oh yeah, I'll take that land. It's not like an inheritance. Like you are actually having to sacrifice something to redeem these people back to their value. Okay, and in this case, they're redeeming the land, but with the land comes the widow. Okay, so they're not redeeming Elimelech, right? Because he's gone. So they're redeeming his land and his family. And so it goes back and says, all right, on the day you do this, you will acquire the dead man's widow, this is verse 5, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the kinsman redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. What's his deal? Could be.
Does this have anything to do with, I don't remember where it is, it's like if somebody
dies and the woman marries the next brother and then has raised children, the children are not the man she's married to, but the previous dead husband or?
Could be, yeah. It could be. Clearly, he thinks that if he were to take this land and her, because it wasn't going to mess with his estate when he was just taking the land, right? Because he didn't have a problem then. It was when Ruth came with it that he was like, well, this may mess up my estate. Meaning that if something happens to him or if something happens with it between them, who knows what would happen with this stuff. So I'm not real sure exactly what his exact deal is, but something tells him that if I marry her, like, it's not going to be what I want.
It's too complicated.
Right.
I have a note here.
Yeah, what you say?
I have a note here that says, if he has a son with her, and if that son is his only surviving heir, his own property can transfer or will transfer to the family of Enid.
That's right. That's what she's saying is that if he redeemed her and then had a son with her, it actually would not be his son. It would be considered her husband's son, the son of. So it'd be Elimelech's grandson. As weird as that is, that was how they registered it. Which means that son could take the inheritance and it would belong to Elimelech's family and not to his, which would be implied. Because again, we know Ruth is young. Like Ruth is young. That's one of the reasons Naomi's trying to find her a husband is so she can have children, right? She can have a place to be. So he doesn't want that responsibility, right? He doesn't want the extra that could come with it. And so at this, now verse 7, now in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. Let's not bring that back, okay? Let's not bring that back. Okay? But so what they do is once they made a deal, one person would give his sandal to the other person as, here's the agreement, right?
Okay, sandal approved.
Right. I mean, like, can you imagine if you're like the wife waiting to see if this deal went down and your husband comes out and he's like, you know, like, he made the deal. You know, like, I mean, look, it would have seemed that way that he gives him his sandal as, hey, here's the agreement, you know.
A man could have like several sets of sandals on the mantle.
No, like in his file drawer instead of papers, he just has sandals. Like,
I would bet after it's finalized, you gave the sandal back, or you have a lot of extra sandals hanging around your house.
that's true. Symbolic. But it's like, I mean, there had to be something that would be finalized to be able to say this. My guess would be because that's why he brought the 10 elders as witnesses. But it was like symbolic to say, here, you know, I make the agreement. So once that's handed to him, the 10 witnesses are like, okay, he agreed to it. Like, we are here to witness it. Just like same thing with inheritance. If somebody was adopted into a family, that's what they would do when the dad died, is they would bring in witnesses who were there for the adoption to say, yes, this is his child. Yeah, Tammy.
I wonder, well, of course it's a dramatization, but in The Chosen, when Matthew got up to get ready for the day, he went to his closet type thing.
Right.
And he pulled out one of the same kind of tunics.
He was also rich, too.
Yeah, and he had lots of sandals.
Yeah, he was rich, so it's possible. It's possible. Now, some probably didn't have sandals at all, you know, and some
I
didn't.
just thought that was an interesting part that they did.
I love how they portrayed him. I mean, obviously it's creative license, but I love how they portrayed him in that show. Matthew, yeah. All right. So, verse 8. So the kinsman redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself. And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today you are witnesses. That's taking a lot on. Truly. It's taking a lot on him. Okay? So it says, then the elders and all those at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you have standing in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem. Now, those two words right there are oftentimes associated together, and some think that Ephratah was like almost like the county, and Bethlehem was like the city, sort of, so to speak. Sometimes they're used synonymously as the same place. But that's why, I think it's in Micah, or Malachi 1, there's a prophecy about O you Bethlehem Ephratah, even though you are small, out of you, that comes the Messiah, so to speak. But those two words are the same. So it's saying, may you have standing in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. All right, so Perez. So this is what you're going to see in just a minute. Boaz is like great grandfather is Perez, who was the son of Judah, right? Which that should tell us something, because Jesus comes from Judah. He is the Lion of Judah, right? Which is what tribe we are a part of, since we have been grafted into Israel. We are brothers and sisters of Christ, which means we are part of the tribe of Judah. Okay? And so he goes on to say, so Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. You notice what they're calling her again? Naomi, which means pleasant, right? And one thing that he said in that sermon today that really caught me is that sometimes we look for the wrong blessings from God. Like we look for replacement as the blessing for what we lost. And Naomi lost her husband, lost her sons. So those are the things she lost in this, and she's bitter, and God has given her this terrible time. But notice, she is blessed right here. And she has no husband, and she actually has really no son. But she has a grandson, right? And so here she is, blessed in the moment with still not having the things that she thought she needed replaced. And it's a moment of when we're reading this story that God is going to be good all the time. Even when everything else is awful, He's still working. And so there's no way she could see this unfolding, because he wasn't even supposed to be the kinsman redeemer to redeem them. Boaz wasn't. And yet he is the one who took them in, and he is the one from whom Jesus would come. Actually, he is the one from whom David would come. And David ends up being the king of Israel. And so it says here, this then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of David. So the one thing he said in that sermon today, and I'll post it online because it's really good. It's short, but it's really good. But he said that when we talk about God's sovereignty and God's control and God's plan, we can only see it in hindsight. You know what I'm saying? We never can see it beforehand. We can only see it after the fact. Oh, that's what he was doing. And yet, here he is. If you had told them ahead of time, hey, I know as awful as this is going to be, the king of Israel, the greatest king that Israel's ever going to see, is going to come from this. There's no way. They'd be like, we don't even have kings anymore. We don't have kings yet. We just have judges. Our country's tore all to pieces. How are we going to have a king? And God's like, you don't need to know it. Just be faithful. And that's what we see. Boaz was faithful. Ruth was faithful, right? And they were faithful to the Lord. Because remember, she said, from now on, your God is my God. And so she was faithful. And God blessed them. And from them came David. So, thoughts on that today?
So Naomi's not directly in the lineage.
No. Naomi's not directly in the lineage of Jesus.
Israel marched out to battle. Judah led. Okay, and so they marched first, and then they were staggered on each side of them. Okay, it's how the armies led. But Nahshon was the leader of Judah when they marched to battle. Really cool.
So he came from a family of leaders. Though, I mean, even when we talk about Rahab, though she had this reputation, she also did what was right and risked her life and was like, wasn't she the one that was like, you all make sure that I'm taken care of when you leave here? Yeah, like she protected her family in the midst of all that, right? So he came from a line of leaders, and it's just a matter of having to choose the right things, and so he did. Boaz, in all this, we see what a faithful man should be. We see what a dedicated woman can be. And interesting, like, did you catch how he referenced her? He gave her the Proverbs 31 reference, that you are a woman of noble character. Right? That's not just saying like you're a nice girl. Like, that's way deeper, way more profound, and way harder to achieve than just being a nice person. Like, you are a woman of noble character. Like, everyone respects you, not just because of how you act, but it's because of how you speak, what you do, how you treat other people, why you're here. Like, everything about her was like, wow. And Boaz, who had servants and was in charge of a lot of stuff and was wealthy, still looked at her like, man, wow. What a blessing that you would want me. And yet he offers himself to her, So let me ask you this. How do you see Jesus in him? Besides the fact that he, was Jesus' great grandfather, whatever. Okay. How do you see Jesus in Boaz?
He treated Ruth with respect because Jesus demonstrated to many women during his lifetime.
Absolutely respected her. He redeemed a foreigner. Those who are not my people are now my people. Absolutely. Now, did he have to? He didn't have to, but by law he could, right? But he didn't have to, right? Jesus chose. It says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Like he...
The only person really would have had to have been in a situation like Phineas.
A brother.
The other kinsman redeemer, he might have been named if he had actually redeemed, but because he didn't, there wasn't significance
Right.
in his life or story.
That's exactly right. Once again, God's plan. He knew it was going to come through the root of Jesse. Was going to come this Savior. So, any other thoughts on Ruth? Yes.
So, Deuteronomy 23, 3 through 6, that was a Moabite curse. The one thing that really stuck with me, actual fact, I thought Ruth was an amazing book. Really loved the study of the kinsman redeemer, just the beauty of Jesus in it. But when you look at the Moabite curse, it clearly says that for 10 generations, the Moabite people will be removed, blotted out, and all of their descendants cannot be a part of the family of God, basically. And from Abraham to Salmon, there was 10 generations. So Boaz was the very first person in the lineage after 10 generations, had a Moabite child by a woman, and that is a perfect circle. And for me, it was one of those little nuggets where you go, oh my gosh, when Moses came down from Sinai and he had the 5 books, and that information was in Deuteronomy, we are already to Judges where God is showing himself here, there, and at the end.
That's
And
beautiful.
It was just so beautiful to me that it was like gravy. It was
Yeah.
the best.
No, that's awesome. That's Deuteronomy 23:23. No Ammonite or Moabite or any of his descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, even down to the 10th generation. And Boaz would be would be the 11th generation when this happens. Pretty awesome. That's just, again, the Bible proving itself. All right. Anything else about Ruth before we dismiss for the night? Where to next? We're just mowing through them now. Huh? I'm going home. What do y'all want to do? Let everybody jump at once. Revelation again? Okay. Ecclesiastes. Oh, mercy. What? Old Testament? New Testament? New Testament. Okay. Did you say Romans? There's a lot in Romans. Truly. Online says James. Who said that? Oh, Charlene. Okay. Is that what y'all been doing in Sunday school? Let's see. James? Is everybody good with James? It's 5 chapters, right? Okay. All right. James it is. Starting next week. Maybe I'll gavel. James. Okay. Sold. All right. So we'll start James next week. Any other thoughts before we dismiss tonight? Debbie Spence had asked us to make sure we continue to remember her son and daughter-in-law in prayer. Still just reeling from the loss of their granddaughter. So, anybody else this evening? It's good to see everybody today. I hope you had a good week. Yeah. So everybody's going to go home and go sleep, I think. All right. Let's all stand together. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Don, will you pray for us?